Okay, yesterday we were chatting about Corrie ten Boom and whether or not she believed in the justification of all. I don't know if she did or not. If she believes the scriptures, especially Paul's teaching, then yes, she did. Because that's what Paul teaches. He talks about the justification of all right here in Romans 5:18. It says, "Consequently then, it was through one offense for all mankind for condemnation. Thus also it is through one just award for all mankind for life's justifying." Now, what I forgot to tell you about that story that I think I read in Corrie's books about the woman who got pregnant when she was in the German concentration camps. She got pregnant by a Nazi officer. She was married, and when they kicked her out of the concentration camps because she was carrying a German baby, she went home to her husband, and as I recall the story, her husband loved her and they raised that child as their own. So I was using that to say that some things are justified. And through the one just award that Christ accomplished on the cross for all mankind, we're going to see life's justifying. But the reason I'm bringing this up again in this part two of the discussion is because there's two stories that I want to tell you about from the Bible that show justification. And the first is the story of Joseph's brothers. Those bastards sold Joseph into slavery. They sold him into slavery and they lied to their father about his condition. They said he had died and that a lion ate him or something like that, right? And they gave him the robe, the coat of many colors that was dipped in blood to prove that he had been, mauled and eaten by a wild animal. But they actually had sold him into slavery. Turns out that he, through his slavery journey, got to be one thing led to another, and he ended up being the prime minister of Egypt. And God showed him a vision in a dream that there was going to be 7 years of famine, and then before that there would be 7 great years of harvest, and then 7 years of famine. So he stored all this grain, stockpiled the grain for 7 years, and then when there were 7 years of famine, guess what? Joseph's brothers came to Egypt and pleaded with the prime minister of Egypt, "Save us, we're starving." The whole family, so he had 12 brothers, I think, 11 brothers. "We're starving and all of our family's starving." And they didn't even recognize that he was their own brother that they had sold into slavery. So it turns out that their bad deed, their evil sin, resulted in their salvation. Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery, more or less killing him, and he turned out to be the great prime minister of Egypt, the number 2 man of Egypt, and he stored up all this grain and saved the family, right? So their behavior was a sin. It was a sin to lie to their father and sell him into slavery, but it turned out to be just the right thing. Their actions were justified. Okay, so it's a complicated story with twists and turns, but all in all, their actions were justified, even though at the end they were still embarrassed by their bad behavior. Now, fast forward. Joseph is a type of Christ. Christ came to Israel, and Israel more or less sold him into slavery, put him up on the cross, dipped his garments in blood, shall we say, and turns out that he's the great king of the eons. And one day they'll all go to Christ and not recognize that he's Christ, and then he'll say, "Hey, don't you recognize me? I'm your brother. I'm the one you sold into slavery. I'm the one you put on the cross." And they'll be terribly embarrassed. But this one just award, this what happened on the cross actually saves all mankind. So, if we can narrow it down to Judas, Judas betrayed Christ for 30 pieces of silver. One day, when the eons are concluded, at the consummation of the eons, when all are vivified, we'll go up to Judas and we'll say, "You're a stinker. But thanks to you, we have a risen Savior who justifies all mankind through his one great award that was accomplished on the cross." We'll go up to Judas and say, "You're a stinker, but thanks." and even that, every mother who's lost a child to some murderous a-hole who murdered their daughter, raped her, one day every mother will go up to that awful man and say, "Thanks to you, your terrible deed brought me closer to God in a weird way. I don't know how it all worked out, but God brought us together, finally." So, thus also through the one just award for all mankind for life's justifying. So those are two little stories I wanted to add to it. I put in 3 stories yesterday, okay, about this life's justifying. For even as through the disobedience of the one man, the vast amount were constituted sinners, one day we'll all go up to Adam and say, "Adam, you dirty, rotten stinker, you ate of the forbidden fruit, and it caused so much trouble throughout the eons. But thanks to you, we know what salvation is, because sinners cannot know salvation unless they sin." Sin is a prerequisite to salvation. It's not that sin is an immortal, impenetrable barrier, an obstacle to salvation. It's not an obstacle at all. It's a prerequisite to salvation. In fact, our brother Paul, down here in verse 20 of Romans 5, says, "Yet law came in by the way that the offense should be increasing." Why would God want the offense to be increasing? He gave the law not for us to keep it, but to make the offenses seem even worse. Why did he do that? Because where sin increases, grace super exceeds, says Romans 5:20. The law came in that sin would just get way out of control, because out of control sin means grace shines even more. I'm not encouraging you to sin. Paul didn't encourage sin, but this is the truth of it all, that sin is a pre-requirement for salvation. Don't think that you have to be holy and sinless before God will love you. That's not the point. The point is justification by grace. What is grace? Grace is the favor that God shows to those who deserve the opposite of favors. None of us deserve the favor of God. Thanks to Adam, that's proof. None of us deserve any favors from God, but yet he shows us favors. This is God's gracious love. He gave us the law that sin would increase. Not just sin, but the offensive part of sin. You've got to stick with the concordant version. It's not that sin would increase, it's that the offense should be increasing. Okay. Thanks for letting me spend a few more moments with you. And as Brother Paul says, grace to you.